So now we're going to start refining our simulation. So if we head back to where we left off before, I still have this flipbook running just so we can see a bit of this stuff in action. Basically, we can see our resolution is a bit too low. Also, simulation time is quite fast. So this is something that we can easily up-res. And then let's start going over some basic settings. So first of all, let's just quickly go over our flip object, see if is anything that we would have to change here, except for the particle separation, which we're going to up in a moment. But I think this should all be fine. On our flip solver, what we do want to add is our, particle motion behavior. Let's start here. Basically, we want to add a ID attribute for each particle. So if we want to get rid of some points, or if we want to modify this later, it's always helpful to have a specific ID for each point, especially when we have reseeding on. The points are not going to stay and sometimes get deleted. Sometimes points are going to be added into the simulation. So just make sure to turn this on. Also an age attribute, which might be helpful. And so for the reap particles, we don't really need this because we're not having a lifespan for our flip particles. So this should be fine here. Then what we want to change is also our collision detection. This is set to particle. We just want to change this to move outside collision. So basically it's going to rely on our SDF that we give it here. And then, I can show you this here. If you go to the flip object guides and then say collision, there you go. And then as soon as this starts to enter, we should start to see basically how the flip simulation is seeing our collision here. And if we go closer in and turn off the visibility of our collider, we can see basically this is how flip is seeing our collider and what it's using. And since this is a volume, what it will do is basically try to move the points outside if they get stuck inside. What we could do here is kill unmovable particles. So basically the ones that are, stuck in some local minima or something that can't escape, just gets rid of those, so we don't have any issues. Or if they at some point then do escape and just shoot out very fast, that could just cause some issues. That's it for this section. Under the reseeding, don't really have to change anything here. The only thing, like if we would have a different grid scale, then I would go ahead and change the particles per voxel, since this would affect that. So for example, if we go lower on our grid scale, then I would also lower the particles per voxel, because obviously then you're going to have more voxels, and so you to keep this kind of the same resolution, you want to have less that have to be in one voxel. But this should be fine for now. Separation, we don't really need that. What we do want to turn on is a droplet detection. So basically, once particles, I think, do I still have the flipper? Yeah. So for example, here, if you look, there's going to be particles that do, at some point, they just detach from the main fluid, and there's like some small droplets that are flying around, and we do want to detect those and basically remove them from the main influence on the sim, because that can cause some unwanted behavior. For example, if some of these travel too far or travel too fast or whatever, or it might cause some issues with the overall motion. So what we do want to do here, just turn on detect droplets, and then so for the general settings here, this should be fine. What we do want to have is the min particle density. Just lower this. So once it gets to a density of 0.2, then it would detach and become a droplet and not influence the main sim. So if we set this to a higher value, then it's going to start earlier to detach earlier. Just, yeah, you could play around with this. I find that lowering this a bit always helps, still keeping more of the smaller parts in the sim and just contributing to it, giving it a bit more chaotic behavior and a bit more interesting behavior as well, instead of just having the big thick parts, the big density parts contributing to the main sim. And just one more thing that we do want to change in the particle motion tab here is the vorticity, and just take add vorticity. This is something that we're going to be using in shading. And so we will see this later once we get to the shading part, how this affects our sim, or how we're going to be using it. Vorticity is kind of like a curl of the fluid. So it's not like velocity. So for example, it could be moving very slow, but it could have a higher vorticity. This is, for example, for like waves, or it's like small ripples that are moving outwards. And rest, we don't need our rest field. Now let's carry over to the volume part. And what we did here under volume limits, we already set this up. This was to set up our flat tank sim. Then one thing that we do want to change here under the collisions tab is stick on collision. So I think this should help, because if we look at our initial simulation here, we don't have much fluid moving upwards. It's just basically disturbing the bottom part, and just a bit of it is dragging up. And I think if we add like a stick on collision, it's gonna add a bit more interesting feel to this. I'm not sure if we're gonna keep this for our ship. I think we might turn it off there, because it's probably gonna drag too much upwards. But since this is a pretty thin object shooting through the surface, this will help drag a bit more of the fluid upwards. And I think this is it for this part here. The only thing that we do want to add is what we were talking about in the intro to Flip, is the adaptivity that we have now in Houdini 18. We just want to turn this off, so solve the pressure with adaptivity. You can go ahead and use OpenCL if you have a good graphics card. Just be aware that at some point we are going to res this up, and I guess that the VRAM is not going to be able to handle it, and then your simulation is going to get messed up, or it's just going to crash. So I usually tend to just keep this off, since my graphics card is not the best. It's a bit older. I'm a bit embarrassed to show, so I'm not going to tell which one it is. But just to say, I'm not using this at the moment. Maybe I will some point in the future. But yeah, just to note that. Narrowband, we already set this up, so that should be fine here. Maybe what we could do is go maybe a bit deeper. So if we turn this to 6, I think this should look good. If we have a bit more particles to encapsulate basically the upwards motion, and as soon as we res this up, so if we go to 0.2, for example, the thickness is going to change anyway. So if you would, I think probably going to simulate this at 0.2, but if we would change this back to 3, then it's going to be a pretty small surface. And we do want to have a bit more of the surface captured with this parameter. So yeah, let's see where we are at for the moment. All right, and let's try to make another flipbook here. First of all, save our scene, turn back our display geometry here, and turn off our collision guide there. And let's have a look. Also, what we could do is hide our flip solver, which just hides the grid, as you can see here. So we can have a better look at that. All right, new flipbook, see how that looks. All right, so already 43 frames into the sim. Oops, there's some black frames here. There you go. Yeah, so already really looking really nice with not too many tweaks that we had to do. They're basically just a standard out of the box sim. So what we I just like this. Love flip. So cool. So basically what we can see here is our droplet detection coming in, which is really giving this like a nice feel. So if you have like the solid stuff and then it starts to separate into more kind of spray-ish type, and the solid parts get less and less, which is something that you would have in a regular real world, not sim, but I'd say real world reference. Now if we look at this, one thing that we do want to add is if we scrub to the beginning, once this emerges through the surface, this looks pretty flat. So here we see this is pushing up, and then we just have like this bulge. So you do want to break this up. Especially this is going to be important for the ship. Once this starts to push up a big area, there's going to be like just probably a huge hill type of thing that we would want to break it up just to make it not look that boring. I mean, I think we could probably live with this, but since we already got to this nice result so fast, let's just add that additional detail, and we're gonna need it anyway. So yeah, nice, really liking this. So let's stop our sim here and just quickly recap. So I mean, you may have said, yeah, well, we didn't do much to our flip solver. I mean, the main thing that we did change is just add some attributes. So the vorticity attribute, the age, and the ID. Reseating was kept the same, and the main part is the droplet detection. And that's basically it. Just change the way collisions are happening. So here in the particle motion, just make sure that it gets moved outside. You can just try both. Maybe the other one looks better for you. I tend to go with the move outside collision because this gives me more stable results. And yeah, the other thing, turned on adaptivity and the stick on collision. So just have a bit more pull up. Let's see if we can show this here. So you can really see basically here, you see this fluid here is really sticking to it, and it has like this nice additional. So you have like the first burst and then the second part that shoots up a bit, and then both falls simultaneously. Once we get to the final sim, we will have to extend this container as well, since what you can see here is like a jump. It's like the entire container is like jumping up. But as soon as we extend this to a proper area, probably going to be like around 10 meters or something, or maybe probably even more than that, to capture everything. Also, we do want to capture part of the rope that gets pulled up, and so we'll do that in the next part once we add this additional breakup in the beginning for the water, and then I think we should be good for our flip simulation here.